Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, Maya Angelou. 3 of the most awarded artists in history. And all of them, at some point in their careers, looked at their own success and said the same thing. I don't deserve this. I'm a fraud. Maya Angelou, author of 11 books and a 3-time Grammy winner, confessed every time she finished a project, she waited for someone to find her out. Tom Hanks, with 2 Oscars on his resume, asked in an interview, when are they going to realize that I'm, in fact, a fraud? So here's the question. If this feeling hits even the most celebrated people in the world, what is actually going on here? It has a name, it has a mechanism, it has a root, and you've almost certainly felt some version of it yourself. Impostor Syndrome is not a mental illness. It doesn't appear in the DSM-5, the official psychiatric diagnostic manual, but that doesn't mean it's simple or superficial.
The term was coined in the 1970s by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, who were studying high-achieving women in academic settings. What they found was unsettling. Women with high performance, degrees, positions, and public recognition were deeply convinced they had fooled everyone around them.
And they identified 3 core characteristics of this phenomenon. First, the belief that others overestimate your talents and abilities. Second, a constant fear of being exposed as a fake. Third, the persistent attribution of your own success to external factors, like luck or extraordinary effort, never to actual capability. And here's the number that really stands out. Research suggests that around 70% of people experience this at some point in their lives. It's not the exception, it's almost the norm. But if it's so common, why does it cause so much damage? To understand the mechanism, we need to go deeper. And this is where a concept from Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, comes in. Kahneman spent decades studying how our brains work. He showed that we have 2 systems of thought, one fast, automatic, and emotional, and another slow, deliberate, and rational. The problem is that the fast system dominates most of the time, and it operates through biases. One of those biases is called the availability heuristic. We tend to judge the frequency or truth of something based on how easily we can bring examples to mind.
So how does this connect to imposter syndrome? Simply put, when you make a mistake, it stays easily available in your memory. It's vivid, concrete, painful. But your achievements, you minimize them, attribute them to luck, treat them as exceptions. The result? When it's time to evaluate your own competence, mistakes weigh far more than wins. It's not weakness, it's the architecture of the brain. And there's another bias Kahneman describes. We tend to overestimate other people's competence when we only see the surface. You see a confident colleague in a meeting, and you don't see the nights they spent in doubt. You see other people's success and feel your own failures. This asymmetric comparison feeds the feeling that you're the only unprepared person in the room. But why are some people more vulnerable than others? Carol Dweck, a professor at Stanford, spent more than 20 years researching this question. And in the book Mindset, she arrived at a powerful conclusion. It all comes down to the belief you hold about your own qualities. People with a fixed mindset believe that intelligence, talent, and character are unchangeable traits. You either have them or you don't. And if you do, you have to prove it constantly.
Dweck describes an experiment with children who were given increasingly difficult puzzles. Some of them, faced with the challenges, shut down, got frustrated, and gave up. But others, and this is what caught Dweck's attention, seemed to light up. A 10-year-old boy exclaimed, "I love a challenge." What separated these 2 groups wasn't talent, it was belief. When you have a fixed mindset and you fail, failure isn't just a bad outcome. It's a threat to your identity, proof that you're not good enough. And that's exactly where imposter syndrome finds fertile ground. Because if you believe your worth is fixed and unchangeable, every achievement comes wrapped in quiet fear. What if it was just luck?
What if I can't do it again? What if they realize I'm not as good as they think? Dweck shows that people in this pattern would rather appear smart than actually learn. They avoid challenges to avoid the risk of failing. And when something goes right, they can't internalize the credit, because accepting it would mean believing they're capable, and that belief feels too dangerous to hold.
Psychologist Sandy Mann, in her book, Why Do I Feel Like an Imposter?, goes deeper on another point, the role of family dynamics in building this pattern. She describes two types of family configurations that appear repeatedly among people with the syndrome. The first is what she calls the successful sibling dynamic, when someone grows up being compared to a brother or sister seen as the talented one in the family. Even when they achieve excellent results, the family narrative doesn't change, and they begin to absorb the idea that deep down, their accomplishments are accidental. The second type happens when the family overly praises a child, creating pressure to maintain an idealized identity. The child grows up believing they need to be brilliant at all times, and any slip feels like a catastrophe. Sandy Mann also identifies specific triggers that activate the syndrome throughout life. The first professional qualification, starting university, a promotion at work. Moments of transition where the feeling of I don't deserve to be here shows up with the most force. And this connects to something behavioral analysis helps us understand. Behaviors are shaped by consequences. If throughout your life your efforts were rarely reinforced, or if the environment punished mistakes harshly, you develop patterns of avoidance. You dodge situations where you might fail, and when you can't avoid them, you anticipate punishment, even when it no longer exists. Here's a point most people don't expect. Research on narcissistic personality disorder points to something apparently contradictory. Narcissists display an extreme need for external admiration, grandiose behavior, and an inability to tolerate criticism. But underneath, extremely fragile self-esteem. What looks like confidence is often a defense, a shield built to protect an identity that feels, at the deepest level, like it's not enough. Imposter syndrome and pathological narcissism share similar roots, the difficulty of internalizing one's own worth. The narcissist inflates the ego to protect the insecurity. The imposter shrinks, hoping no one notices the fraud. Two sides of the same coin. The inability to believe you are enough for who you actually are. The good news is that this isn't permanent, and science points to clear paths forward.
First, separate thought from fact. The brain produces automatic thoughts. They feel like truths, but they're just hypotheses. I got in by luck is a thought, not an evidence-based conclusion. Practice questioning where that thought comes from before accepting it. Second, change your relationship with effort. Carol Dweck showed that people with a growth mindset understand effort not as a sign of weakness, but as the mechanism of development. You don't need to already know. You need to be learning. Those are completely different things. And there's a detail Dweck shows that changes everything.
We have a habit of looking at someone at the beginning of their journey and already drawing conclusions. This one will go far. That one has no talent. This one is promising. That one is limited. But that reading is almost always wrong. Darwin, the man who revolutionized biology, was considered an ordinary student by his own teachers. There was nothing there signaling what was to come. Cindy Sherman, one of the most important photographers of the 20th century, failed her very first photography course, in the field where she would become a world reference. The point isn't that failure leads to success. The point is simpler than that. The beginning says nothing about the end. And why? Because potential isn't something you discover. It's something you build. It's not hidden inside you, waiting to appear. It takes shape over time, through effort, through experience. So when you're in doubt, feeling like you're not good enough, remember this: you're not revealing a limit. You're in the middle of the building process.
Third, build concrete records.
Kahneman showed that memory is selective and biased. If you don't document your achievements, they'll be forgotten, and the mistakes will stay vivid. Keep an evidence journal. Completed projects, positive feedback, problems solved. Use your brain's slow system to counterbalance the fast, emotional one. Fourth, talk about it. Sandy Mann observes that one of the biggest fuels of imposter syndrome is silence. The person believes they're the only one who feels this way, and that reinforces the illusion that the feeling is proof of something real. When you realize that colleagues, leaders, and people you look up to also feel this, the narrative starts to fall apart. Fifth, accept incompleteness as a starting point, not a destination. The central message of the growth mindset is that you don't need to be ready to begin. You become more capable in the process. Waiting to feel prepared before acting is a trap, because deep preparation comes through action, not before it. Imposter syndrome is not about who you are. It's about the story your brain learned to tell, about your mistakes being bigger than your wins, about other people's success being more legitimate than yours, about needing to prove something that's already been proven. Maya Angelou wrote 11 books feeling like she'd be found out. Tom Hanks won 2 Oscars afraid of being exposed, and yet they kept going. Not because they felt ready, but because they understood that the feeling of being an imposter is not a diagnosis of reality. It's a pattern, a mental habit, and habits can be changed.
The question isn't waiting for that inner voice to go away. It's learning to act, even while it's still talking. And if you made it to the end, hitting like really helps this channel grow. And leave a comment. I'd love to read every single one. See you in the next video.